Thank you for the invitation to speak here at the conference. Indeed, I'm going to talk about CERIF, the Common European Research Information Format, and what it could bring to our users. All right, so this is where we can actually start. CERIF is the tool that we can use. Let's get a few basic notions right here. We speak about current research information systems. They are known as RIMS in the US more. But basically, it's an information system to register and document research, but at different kinds of levels. It can be research done in an institution. In that case, it's an institutional CRIS, and PURE is precisely in this category. But then you will notice that funders have their CRISs as well, because they need to register and document research funded by themselves. Research infrastructures are also required to have CRISs more and more, because they need to document the research that is being done using a research infrastructure. And then you may find quite a number of CRISs that aggregate contents from other CRISs in order to register and document research done in a territory. So there would be national or regional CRISs in quite a number of countries around Europe. Why we speak of current research, it's not just the research that is being currently performed, it's research that is of current interest. So it can be also research that has been performed in the past, but is relevant these days, or it can be research that is currently being planned. So CERIF is actually a comprehensive information model for the domain of scientific research. It's intended to support the interchange of research information between CRISs and with CRISs. It's developed and maintained by euroCRIS, a not-for-profit organization based in the Netherlands, with members all over Europe and growing membership in the rest of the world as well. Namely, developed by the CERIF task group, which I'm leading these days. And there is a newly formed technical committee for interoperability standards that will bring this further. What do we mean by research information? The classical or traditional sort of meaning would be research results, the outputs, publications, research data sets coming to the focus these days, research software and patents, yes. But it could be also the outcomes of research, so more broader effects the research has had, and also impacts on the life of the society. But not just that, we also want to document the research process, which means research projects, the funding that is being used by the research, and also the research infrastructures. And then another kind of activity is actually scholarly communication, so events of all kinds. Okay, but someone has to be doing this. So obviously it's the actors in research. So researchers themselves, of course. But then we've got the institutions, the funders, publishers. We've got the research facility operators, and we've got associations. Quite in a couple of situations, actually one organization may be acting in several of these roles. So there may be a funding, a small funding agency within an institution, for instance, or an institution can be a publisher of a series of journals, for instance, or it can operate facilities. But all these functions can also be brought outside of a scientific institution. And the most value actually is in the connections between these points in the information space. So think of graphs that become popular these days. So CERIF has had quite a long development, and we made sure that it's actually usable for all kinds of research information that may be found out there. This is an overview. I hope you can read the names of the entities there. We've got a core where we traditionally put the persons, the organizations and organizational units, and projects. This seems to be something that is essential for pretty much every CRIS that is out there. And then we've got a couple of pluggable modules which could be used but can also be left unpopulated. So the infrastructures is one such module where we would map the facilities, the equipment, and also research-related services. Information services belonging to this category as a subclass. So euroCRIS is in fact an information service and comes in here. Then there would be activities, so mainly funding and events. With funding, we mean both funding opportunities, such as funding programs and calls, as well as funding that has been granted to a specific project and is being used to bring that project forward. Obviously, we would also have entities for the research outputs. We would also be able to make all kinds of statements about research and the information that is in here, both qualitative and quantitative. So if you think of research assessment exercises, they would the information collected in the framework of such exercises would come in here. And we also need to somehow document the profiles of researchers and of research institutions as well. So the way ORCID profile is structured, for instance, can be mapped directly to CERIF. Oops. Currently, we have an XML-based interchange format, which allows the information to be interchanged between CRISs. What we plan on producing is JSON and RDF. This will happen in the framework of a CERIF refactoring project, which has been launched by euroCRIS recently. How this relates to Pure? Actually, members of the Pure development team in the times of Atira, the small Danish company, they were members of the CERIF task group, and we had very fruitful exchange between them and the rest of the group. And also members of the current pure development team are members of the technical committee for interoperability standards. I'll bring forward two examples here. One is OpenAIRE. OpenAIRE is yet another CRIS, aggregating CRIS, and is trying to harvest information about research. Previously, it was just about open access research. Now it's all kinds of research that is out there. And the size of information they have amassed is amazing. We've produced one of the standards that OpenAIRE uses for collecting the information. It's the OpenAIRE guidelines for CRIS managers. In contrast to the other guidelines, these guidelines have a broader scope. They concentrate not just on the research results, but all three categories of research information I've been talking about. And in particular about projects, funding, equipment, services, events, and obviously the persons and organizations are first-class citizens in that space as well. Currently, there have been 11 CRISs test harvested, available in the beta platform of OpenAIRE. What is important for pure users, you can enable this functionality since pure version 5.14. And we've got one pure test harvested also in this platform, which is a VTT CRIS in Finland. The other example I want to bring up is the Open Knowledge Base project planned in the Netherlands, which should act as a national backbone for the interchange of information related to research. So interchange of information between institutions and funders, NWO, the most prominent research funder in the Netherlands, being in the forefront of the effort. This is a project that has Elsevier as an implementation partner, and we hope CERIF is going to play an important role in here as well. So to wrap up, CERIF is a standard for research information interchange. So think of reducing the number of times you need to retype the same information in different systems. It can be used both to facilitate one-way reporting and also both ways information enrichment. So thank you, and I hope you will have questions which I can answer.
Thank you, Jan. So this is very interesting. So I have a couple questions that come up. So one is sort of, you talk about this as the European standard. So is it the only game in town? Are there other things? Because it seems like this strikes me as a kind of a parallel problem to thinking about how where I come from, electronic health systems talk, electronic health records talk to each other, right? So you need a common data model, and then you need a way of kind of a space to integrate them and a way to query them, right? So, and it seems kind of a similar sort of thing. So I'm just kind of curious whether there are other parallels to CERIF, or whether it's a thing all unto itself.
There have been different formats for information interchanges that are happening in pretty much ad hoc ways. So you would have a specific way, a specific format for the ORCID API, for instance, or when you want to register a DOI with Crossref, that would also be one of ad hoc formats that you would need to comply to. CERIF is trying to actually become a language that can be used in many situations, and it seems that it's the only model of this level of comprehensivity or scope.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about how Pure has been involved in this, and how it drives it? Or I mean, and who else has to play? I mean, are there other? There must be other. I mean, because Pure is an example of a common data model, right? Where we've got institutions that have, I mean, so what sort of role have they played, and are there other Pure-like entities that are involved?
Yeah, sure. The Pure data model has been inspired by CERIF to a large extent. And also CERIF has taken inspiration from the efforts by Pure. That was like 10 years ago, or even earlier than that. This was a fruitful exchange. I should also mention that CERIF has been endorsed by the European Commission as the standard to use when building information systems. Since that time, we have recognized that it does not really matter too much about what is inside an information system. It's rather more important if systems can talk a single language, a single format, and make themselves understand across the wire.
So how many CRIS systems are interacting with CERIF right now? What's the breadth?
Oh, well, for instance, these OpenAIRE guidelines for CRIS managers, which is a profile or subset trimmed down of CERIF, has been implemented by Pure, but also by other CRISs, such as DSpace CRIS, which is an open source platform, but also direct competitors of Pure are looking into implementing this. And there are also quite a number of in-house built systems, and most of these are also looking into ways of implementing this common standard to make themselves visible within OpenAIRE.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you talked a little bit about research output, like publications and proposals and things like that, but what about other things that are collated in Pure, or maybe in other systems, like conference presentations, committee memberships, things like that? Is there a way to include those activities as well?
Yes. CERIF will include all of that. You can have committees represented as organizational units of a temporary nature, and then you can list the members, for instance, for such a committee. Yeah, we made sure that CERIF covers all these scenarios.
Yeah. So is there a case study of somebody using CERIF to make sense of something with regard to research across these institutions or geographical spaces of interest? Can you think of an application of it, I guess, that?
Well, I think this OpenAIRE application is quite a good example of that. And yeah, it's growing. On the other hand, it's a little bit under the hood for normal users. we don't get too much interest in what's inside, as long as it works.
Right. All right. Thank you very much, Jan. That was very interesting, very stimulating presentation. I think we should move on to our next presentation.